Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video, and this video is going to be sort of a fly with me video. That's where I just jump in and kind of mess around with the Orbiter. I'm making this video because I got some new equipment and I just want to make sure that everything is set up right. I want to make sure the sound levels are good. I got a new HD webcam, so it should, my pilot display up in the upper right should be a lot sharper than it used to be. I got a couple new monitors. I got a lot of new equipment here, so I just want to record an Orbiter video and just make sure everything is set up right. So in this video, what I'm going to do is pick up my old Space Shuttle Atlantis scenario that I have, and this one has a scripted audio that Dimitri made for me, so that when we get to the right time to launch, it will have audio coverage. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through this, not really do a whole lot of explanation, because again, this is going to be a fly with me style. Alright, we do not need to target Cape Canaveral on the map. There's no need to do that because we're not going to the base. Okay, and we'll bring up a line plane on this side. We're going to target the ISS. And we'll be underway here in just a couple more seconds. Go ahead and warp time forward. When the sim time is at 540 seconds, I believe, that's when the scripted audio kicks in. So I'm just going to warp time forward to get to that point. A little faster. Okay, we're almost there. And now I can hear the audio starting.
Space Shuttle now on internal power. Liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen fill and drain valves are closed. Solid rocket booster flight data recorders are activated. And the handoff to Atlantis's onboard computers. Atlantis now in control of the countdown.
I think at 4 seconds is when I need to engage. There's a
Firing
little bit
chain
of
is
delay
armed.
when you
Sound
engage the
suppression
main
water
engine.
system activated. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Houston now controlling. Atlantis begins its penultimate journey to shore up the International Space Station. Atlantis now in the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the International Outpost. 30 seconds into the flight. Atlantis almost 2 miles in altitude, almost 6 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center already, traveling 500 miles an hour.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this. The audio skips for some reason. It's ahead
3
of me
liquid
already.
fuel main engines now throttling back to 72% of rated performance, going into the bucket, reducing the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier.
I was never able to figure out why that happens. The audio just skips. I've heard it skip
55
twice
seconds
already.
into the flight, all systems operating normally, 900 miles an hour. The speed of Atlantis right now, 6 miles in altitude, 9 miles downrange.
Atlantis, go with throttle up.
Copy, go with throttle up.
The throttle up call acknowledged by Commander Charlie Hobaugh, joined on the flight deck by pilot Butch Wilmore, flight engineer Randy Bresnik, and Leland Melvin. Seated down on the middeck are Mike Foreman and Bobby Satcher, kicking off their work week with a Monday commute to orbit.
These new monitors are awesome. So much
1
better
minute,
than what I
30
used to have.
seconds into the flight. Atlantis,
Orbiter
13
looks
miles in
amazing.
altitude, 15 miles downrange, traveling almost 2,000 miles an hour.
I'm gonna have to pitch over a little faster than the
3 good
the
auxiliary
gravity
power
turret.
units, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good main engines. One minute, 50 seconds into the flight. 10 seconds away from solid rocket booster separation.
Everything's set on that side. So we'll see if we can catch the solid rocket booster separate. We'll see how far off the audio is. There's my boosters.
Booster officer confirms staging a good solid rocket booster separation. Guidance now converging. Atlantis steering into the center lane of Highway 129 en route to the International Space Station.
Okay.
2 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight, 34 miles in altitude, 48 miles downrange. Atlantis traveling 3,200 miles an hour.
We've already got an apoapsis close to 200. Time to apoapsis 139 counting down. I'm okay with that. And we are getting toward the
The
descending
propulsion
node
officer
still.
in Mission Control reports that the orbital maneuvering system engines have ignited. Atlantis kicking on the
I would
afterburners.
say that rate is still good.
Copy. Engine down.
Atlantis flying on the singular power of its 3 liquid fuel main engines, draining about a half a ton of fuel per second from the large fuel tank. Coming up on the 3-minute mark into the flight, Atlantis 46 miles in altitude, 81 miles downrange, traveling almost 4,000 miles an hour. Atlantis speeding straight as an arrow toward its date with the International Space Station Wednesday morning.
Relative inclination coming down. Time to the node still counting down, so we're still approaching the node. That's good. Time to apoapsis 114.
3.5 minutes into the flight, all of Atlantis' systems functioning by the book. 55 miles in altitude, 120 miles downrange, traveling almost 5,000 miles an hour.
I feel like my relative inclination isn't quite...
Atlantis, negative return.
This is a good rate.
Atlantis copies. Negative return.
Atlantis now too far downrange, too high in altitude to return to the launch site in the event of an engine failure. All 3 engines performing perfectly.
Have a look outside. Spin the camera.
4 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Atlantis now 62 miles in altitude, 180 miles downrange, traveling almost 6,000 miles an hour. All systems performing normally. Atlantis on course, on track for its preliminary orbit. The Environmental Systems Officer reports a good flash evaporator system activated for Atlantis, providing cooling for the shuttle's avionics until the payload bay doors are open about an hour and a half into the flight.
Hardest thing I have with the shuttle, and I also run into this problem a little bit with the Falcon, is that vertical launch. It's hard to get to the heading because you have to roll and yaw at the same time, and they kind of fight each other. So it's kind of tricky to get rolled quickly to the heading so that you can begin pitching over, because you want to start pitching over almost immediately, but I find that if you don't get to the right heading
Atlantis,
first...
press to ATO.
Copy. Press to ATO.
That call up from Capcom Chris Ferguson indicating that Atlantis can now make minimal orbital altitude targets in the event of an engine failure. However, all 3 engines continue to perform normally, as do the auxiliary power units and the 3 power-producing fuel cells. 5.5 minutes into the flight, Atlantis now 67 miles in altitude, 312 miles downrange, traveling almost 8,000 miles an hour.
Frankfurt single engine ops.
As you can see, I'm now at the node, so I need to get all my vertical, or all my relative inclination resolved quickly.
Atlantis now beginning to roll to a heads-up position, the main engine swiveling, enabling the shuttle to move to a heads-up position above its fuel tank, gaining more favorable communications through the tracking and data relay satellite system as it heads uphill.
Now I'm going to start rolling, or yawing back to center.
Atlantis, press to MECO, single engine Zaragoza 104.
Press to MECO, single engine Zaragoza 104.
That call from Capcom Chris Ferguson to Commander Charlie Hobaugh indicating that Atlantis can make normal orbital cutoff targets in the event of an engine failure.
Go for the pitch.
You hear him say in the audio that they roll over to get a more favorable position. I find you can't do that in orbiter because the engines on the space shuttle don't swivel.
Now 6 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. Atlantis 66 miles in altitude, almost 500 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, traveling almost 11,000 miles an hour.
You'll notice these engines, they're swiveled
90
this
seconds
way,
left in power
and if you roll the shuttle over,
104.
they're just swiveled in the wrong
Single
direction.
engine pass 104.
So we've got a really good relative inclination here. I'm happy with that. Where do we get time to apoapsis?
Coming up on the 7.5 minute mark into the flight, the main engines will once again be throttled down to limit the stress on the shuttle and its 6 crew members to that of 3 times the effective gravity. Atlantis approaching a speed of more than 4 miles a second. At the time of main engine cutoff a minute from now, Atlantis will enter its preliminary orbit at a speed of 5 miles a second.
Everything's still looking really good.
7 minutes, 40 seconds into the flight. Atlantis providing a smooth ride uphill for Commander Charlie Hobaugh and his crew.
Don't want to gain much more altitude.
700 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, traveling 15,000 miles an hour.
But I don't want to pitch way below the horizon. I hate having to do that. If you have to pitch below the horizon, and I think it basically just means your ascent was kind of lousy.
8 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight.
And I'm having to pitch way below the horizon to keep the time, to keep the apoapsis time from counting up. I want the time to apoapsis to get a little farther out in front of me.
Standing by for main engine cutoff. Main engine cutoff confirmed by the booster officer. Standing by for external tank separation.
Down a little more to keep that apoapsis time.
And the bird's eye view from the external tank camera of external tank separation. Atlantis now in its preliminary orbit. Commander Charlie Hobaugh will now maneuver Atlantis so that cameras embedded in the shuttle's umbilical well can perform photography of the discarded external fuel tank. And Mike Foreman and Leland Melvin are about to use digital still and video cameras to capture handheld imagery of the tank for downlink a few hours from now. A flawless climb to orbit for the Shuttle Atlantis and its 6 crew members en route now to the International Space Station.
One is not required.
Hey, that should be low. No, it's definitely low enough for the external tank to get some atmospheric drag and hopefully come back down without crashing over top of a populated area. Alright, so that's the end of the scripted audio. Now let's roll. Well, first pitch to level. And we'll roll over and jettison the external tank. And I got to do this quickly because my time to apoapsis is only 130 seconds out. So I should probably let it go a little farther ahead of me. Okay, J to jettison the tank. Tank's away. Now I'm going to immediately go to orbit, HUD, and transition to prograde because I gotta start my OMS 2 maneuver right away. And that's... okay, that's a crash. Yeah, that's not good. Oh well. Orbiter doesn't have collisions yet. And as everybody may or may not know, you actually have to pitch the vessel up 15 degrees. So that this crosshair is on the center point because the engines, the OMS engines are at an angle. I think you can use attitude MFD to hold it. I'll have to try that. Okay, we're about 68 seconds. Let's go ahead and put full power on the main engines. It might be a little early. No, apoapsis time still counting down. So we're okay to do full power on the main. Out of curiosity, let me check. Attitude MFD. Yeah, set pitch 15. Not sure why this information's all screwed up. Okay, oops. Okay, stop.
Translation. Rotation.
That's gonna screw up my plane alignment. So I'm gonna have to pitch down below the horizon a little bit to make up for it. I'll have to look into this. I'm not actually sure how this works. I thought you just set the pitch to 15 and that would be it. Pitch minus 15. Nope, I don't know. I'll figure it out later. Time to apoapsis is starting to count up, so I'm going to back off the engines a little bit. Let me check my aligned plane. The orbit is pretty close to circular. Just a little bit more to go. Back off the main a little bit more. Started the burn just a little bit early. That's why the time to apoapsis is climbing. I could kill the engines and coast a little bit, but just get it all done in one burn. The space shuttle is so much weaker than the Delta glider. If you happen to have seen my absolute beginner guides and you're now watching this video, this is just an indicator, you know, of how much more powerful those fictional crafts are, like the Delta glider and XR2. Back off the main a little bit more. I do find it enjoyable to use the space shuttle from time to time for the fact that, you know, it kind of keeps you grounded in reality. My circularization is obviously good enough at this point, but I'm just going to go ahead and circularize all the way since I'm still behind the apoapsis. Backing off the main a little bit more. And once the orbit is circular, the next priority will be to align the plane, finish aligning the plane. Technically, with this little bit of relative inclination, we don't even have to. But just as a matter of practice, we'll go ahead and align the plane. Very close to the apoapsis, so I'm going to go ahead and put in a burst of main engine here in a second, just to get that last little bit of circularization done. And we'll go with that. That's good enough. Okay, so that takes care of that. And let's see what the fate of the external tank was. I think it's, I can't remember. It's, you have to type in the name of it. It's STS-129-tank. Can kind of follow the tank from time to time. And Control F3 to get back to the space shuttle. Right. And ISS. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and warp time forward over to the ascending node. So that means we're going to do an anti-normal burn. Hopefully you remember that from the Absolute Beginner Guide if you happen to have seen that. And we're going to be burning for a total of 9.94 seconds using the full power of the main engines. And since the space shuttle is very weak compared to the fictional craft, we will use the full power of the main engines. And we're going to do that burn when we're 4 seconds from the ascending node, because that's well, about 4.5 seconds, because that's half of the estimated thrust. We want to balance the burn, half on one side, half on the other. Getting reasonably close to that point. Need to give the autopilot time to settle, so we'll go anti-normal now. And the same thing will apply when I'm in the anti-normal position and the space shuttle. I'll still have to offset by 15 degrees. Quick control F3, see what's going on with the external tank. It is still at 165 kilometers. It hasn't reached its periapsis yet. I wish the NFDs didn't reset like that, but that's okay. Got 115 seconds to play with. Let me bring attitude MFD back up just to see if I can figure out this pitch deal. So this is where I'm at right now. If I just want 15 degrees of additional pitch, how do I do that? Okay, I can understand why this doesn't work, because I'm telling it to pitch to 15 degrees, not to give it 15 more. I want like a relative pitch. Maybe if I hit reference to zero everything out. Or I suppose I could do this.
Translation rotation.
Just pitch up and then have it hold. Right there and hold. Nope, guess that doesn't work either. Okay, I think I see what I've got to do. Alright, you got to pitch to where you want to be pitched. Just here. I overshot it. So there. Now I want to reference this position and hold. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, going to be beginning this burn here in just about 5 seconds. As soon as this lights up, we'll do it. There we are, full power on the main. You can see the relative inclination coming down. And there it is, and I like to go ahead and burn until the estimated thrust is basically zero.
Translation.
So, there we go. Alright, so I guess I figured that out. That's how you do that. Now we can unhold. Now, let's bring up Orbit MFD. Target the ISS. And we are in front of the ISS, so it needs to catch up to us. Just barely. So I need to raise one side of my orbit at least above the ISS, because my time is 5,437 seconds. And the time of the ISS is 5,505 seconds. So let's go prograde. If I continue with this situation, I'm going to continually get farther and farther ahead of the ISS, and I need it to catch up to me, so I need to extend my orbital period so that it's greater than this number. Basically done with the line plane. Let's bring up map MFD. And I guess I really won't worry too much about rendezvous in the, well, maybe I will. I was going to say I won't worry about rendezvousing during the day, but I guess we'll go ahead and do that as well. But before I get too far ahead of the ISS, I want to, again...
Rotation.
Pitch up here 15. This is really important now that my plane's aligned. If you don't do this pitch up, you'll actually get yourself out of alignment, relative inclination. Okay, so now my orbit's basically circular, so it doesn't really matter. My periapsis, apoapsis are the same. What I want to do though, yeah, if I raise the opposite side of my orbit here, then it'll be somewhere over in the day, but that'll be fine. So we'll just shoot for like close to 400 kilometers. That should give my orbital period greater than the ISS. Boosting to a higher orbit. My orbital period is 5,460 seconds. I'm still faster than the ISS. So I should bring back up attitude, reference my position, and it still seems to be drifting out. My orbital period's still, no, here we are, still faster than the ISS, so I'm going to go above 400. It's now taking me longer to orbit than the ISS, so the ISS will eventually catch up to me. Let's go for 450, just make it an even number. Don't want to go too high because everything that I'm putting in has to be taken back out. Go with that. Okay, now we need to find a point in our orbit where we're going to rendezvous. So let's bring up map. And let's turn off this information so I can see the points better. We've got apoapsis here, periapsis here. Probably going to be my periapsis, which means the altitude of the ISS will be pretty close to this number. I can actually use this number, 365. So what I'll do is go around to my apoapsis and then raise my periapsis to 365, and we'll say that that'll be our rendezvous point. And it's not going to be exact because notice that the ISS is past this position, but it's going to be very close. It's going to be within a few meters, a few dozen meters, a few hundred meters. So we'll just say that my periapsis will be the rendezvous point. All right, let's fast forward time then. To apoapsis. Now the ISS should start getting ahead of me on this side. Okay, we're almost at apoapsis, getting pretty close. Go prograde. And I guess while I'm doing this, I can go ahead and open the cargo bay doors. They'll have to be opened eventually for docking. There's a whole procedure for opening these, but the keyboard shortcut's K, and they only open one side at a time. And there's a way to extend the antenna as well. Don't remember how to do that off the top of my head. I have to refer to the documentation. Let's get a better camera angle. Now what I'm going to do, I'll just eyeball it. I was going to bring up I've got a calculator that will calculate how much delta V is required to raise an orbit, but I don't feel like bringing that up right now. Get a little bit closer, probably because we've only got to raise the PEA by 50 kilometers.
Bay door open.
so I don't need a whole lot of time. That's
Translation rotation.
probably do need that much time though, 47 seconds. So we're going for 365 on the PEA. This is going to slow down my orbit even more. Okay, Appalachia's time is still counting down. Remember that somewhere over here, the ISS is at about 365 kilometers, so that's going to be our target. Just about there.
Translation.
And 365. Now, I need to synchronize my orbit so that I can eventually catch up to the ISS at that point. So bring up sync orbit, target ISS, and we're going to choose ship's periapsis, and we're going to extend the length out to 18. Now, what I'm going to have to do in this situation, because it says that the best time, the closest approach that I'll have to, I might actually be able to resolve that, because I'm still way over here.
Rotation. Translation. Rotation. Translation. Rotation.
With a little bit of inward, I might be able to bring the DT min down. I don't know, that's an awful lot of DT min.
Translation.
Yeah, I might be able to do this actually. So in this case, I'll be able to rendezvous with the ISS as soon as I get around to the other side. I'm using inward instead of, forward or reverse translation. That way I don't.
Rotation.
That way I don't actually impact my
Translation.
periapsis by much. And by inward, that's what I mean. I'm using translation thrusters to push the vessel this way. I don't know if that's going to work though, because that's just a lot of DT min. If it were just one or two, I'd be able to do this. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. It's bringing my PEA down too much. So I'm going to re-raise the PEA. Yeah, okay, I'm going to skip this intersection. I just don't think I'm going to be close enough, or I mean, I know I'm not going to be close enough, and I can't resolve it, so I'm just going to have to come around to my periapsis. And then once this goes away, once this resets, then I'll be able to adjust for DT min. And this will also give me a better look at exactly what the altitude of the ISS is at this point. Okay, we're almost at the periapsis. Let's go program. Use a little bit of 10x to speed that up. Okay, the exact altitude of the ISS at this point is 363, so it's a little bit lower than I thought. We'll make that adjustment on the other side. About 364, we'll call it. Okay, now, still 67 seconds of correction here.
Rotation.
Yeah, retrograde. think I'll still be able to get it.
Translate rotation.
Just getting rotated up. Ideally, you really want to do this adjustment when you're right at periapsis or apoapsis if you're doing ship's apoapsis.
Translation. Rotation. Translation.
Actually, it looks like we're going to go around 5 times. That's okay. Alright, so in 5 orbits, we should be good to rendezvous. Now, I still have the opportunity, because I've got that many orbits, I could go ahead and raise this side of my orbit, because I'm a kilometer off, but 1 kilometer is close enough to rendezvous. Now push my periapsis all the way over here. So I definitely need to check the altitude, the ISS at that point. Okay, and around we go. Okay, and the altitude. The ISS here is 362.5, and for me it's 360, so I need to bring it up 2 kilometers. And I've got time to do that, so I will. So I'm going to go around to apoapsis. Pretty close. Prograde.
Translate rotation.
And of course this will affect my DT min, but I'll fix that when I get back down to periapsis. Okay, so we're raising periapsis by 2 kilometers. And start to burn now. Oops, too soon. More. And we'll go with that. Okay, now back around to periapsis. Do an adjustment on the DT min. Close, let's go prograde. At that point.
Translation.
And that's it for DT min. So now my altitude at this point is 362.4. The ISS is 362.5. So we are exactly where we need to be. Relative inclination is 0. Now we can set up our communications equipment. Bring up ComNav. And I can't believe I still don't have the information for the ISS memorized. Although I actually have noticed that the frequencies that are used vary from one scenario to another. Yeah, like in this one, the docking ports are 108, but in other scenarios, they're 137. Okay, so we want the transponder 131.30. It's going to be here. the docking port, I'm not going to use 3. 3 is kind of my favorite, but there's a solar panel that's in the way if you're docking with the space shuttle, because the space shuttle doesn't dock nose on, it docks on its back, and there's a solar panel that is in the way. So we'll go with docking port number 1. I think docking port number 1's okay. Alright, that's that. Now we'll bring up dock, switch over to the docking HUD. We're 84 kilometers out, and we've still got quite a few orbits to go, so let's just warp time forward. And if I need to, when I get down to maybe the last orbit, I'll do another adjustment to the DT min. Sometimes, as I mentioned in my beginner guide, that can get perturbed over time. A little faster. There's the DT min's off a bit there. So just because we can, we'll go ahead and do a bit of a correction here as we're getting down to the last orbit.
Rotation.
You can see the ISS in front of us. I don't know if you can see it in the playback, but I can see it out the front window. It's right there. But we've got a whole orbit to go to catch up to it yet. Okay, so we're almost here at our rendezvous point.
Translation.
So I'm just going to translate just a little bit. It's the wrong direction. And there we are. DT min's back to 0.00. Now, effectively, I feel like we're done with sync orbit MFD. We don't really need it for anything at this point. We just want to watch. We just want to watch this stuff basically now. In fact, we can even switch over to nav2 because we're so close to the ISS. We can actually just use nav2 from here on out. Some warping time forward. Notice I'm getting a little farther away from the ISS at the moment. That's normal. But as I come around and then get back around this way, I'll get closer to it. Notice the relative velocity now starting to go the other direction. Still got half an orbit to go. And the space shuttle is very weak, so we'll use the we'll have to go to the negative velocity vector to zero out our relative velocity difference, although we probably could get all of that with translation, but it would take a while. Okay, we're only 7 kilometers out. Let's go ahead and get rotated.
Rotation.
So there's the ISS. You can see it. But what we're going to do is go around to the negative velocity vector and get much closer. There it is. Now shot it. Now I'm just going to warp time forward until I'm at least, less than 1 kilometer from the ISS. Yeah, we could definitely just do all this with translation. But I'll go ahead and zero it out anyway, since I'm already facing this way. And once again, we'll have to pitch up 15, since the OMS engines are offset. Getting a little closer just for the fact that we're just going so slow. There's no need to zero. Okay, that's let's get down to 500 meters. Okay, that's close enough. So now we'll get the vessel pitched right to the negative velocity vector and just apply enough main engine to zero out the velocity difference.
Translation. Rotation.
And power that side off. I'll get rotated so I can see the ISS. And as luck would have it, we are looking at the docking corridor. Now the space shuttle is pretty darn tricky to dock. It takes a whole lot of getting used to when you're used to docking straight on with the Delta Glider and XR2 and even the Vanguard has an option to shift the RCS system so that you can dock using the same controls. But with the space shuttle, you can't. You have to really just change your thinking when you're docking to the ISS or docking anywhere using the space shuttle. So now I'm going to point my nose toward the end of the corridor because I want a lot of time. I'm going to put in just a little bit of main engine to get myself moving in that direction. And then I just kind of want to watch for the velocity vector to come up that way.
Translation.
And we'll go forward a little faster because we're still 500 meters out. I'm going to say that's good enough. You don't want to do too much with the space shuttle because the RCS or thrusters are pretty weak, so I'm going to have to eliminate this much velocity using just RCS. So get down there a little closer.
Rotation.
Actually, it kind of looks like yeah, it looks okay. I was seeing the corridor wrong, so we're going to have to go past the ISS all the way to the other side. That's okay. I'm going to power this side off for now, just so I can see myself pass underneath of it. I thought the corridor was showing me lining up this way, but it's not. It's all the way back there. So I'm going to have to go past the ISS, get to the other side. So what I'm going to do, take advantage of the fact that I'm going to have to turn around.
Translation.
Go ahead and rotate 180 degrees. There's the negative velocity vector. Wait till I'm a couple hundred meters out in front of the ISS. And then we'll be able to use the main engines to slow ourselves down quickly. I'll get a little farther away. There's one box. Go a little farther out. I just need to give myself time. That's good enough. Zero out the velocity. Okay, now we'll bring this back up. And first thing I'm going to do is get translated up into
Translation.
Into the corridor. I'm even going to back off a little bit more, give myself a rate of about negative 0.10 meters per second, backing off the ISS still a little bit. And I also am going to tell the ISS to stop rotating, so I'm going to bring up the remote vessel control and select the ISS and hit kill rotate. And I'll probably have to do this a few times. But if I don't do it, it's just going to keep rotating and I'm going to be chasing it constantly. Okay, that allows me to get kind of over toward the corridor better. Right.
Rotation.
Rotate. I'm going to move up, translate up.
Translation.
A little faster, there we go. Okay,
Rotation.
a little more yet. Want to be in the corridor.
Translation.
And now I'm going to zero out my velocity a little bit. I want to start moving toward the ISS slowly. Just 0.1 meter.
Rotation.
Okay, I'm still not in the corridor.
Translation.
So putting in a lot more up translation. There we go, that's better. Now we're getting there.
Rotation. Translation.
Okay, there we are. We're in the corridor. So now I want to basically zero everything out. Move forward though, just a little bit. Just a little bit of up translation, a little bit of left, or rather right. Like that. Now I need to flip the
Rotation.
space shuttle over. Because the docking port is on the back. This is what makes docking with the ISS tricky, because you can't see the ISS as you're docking to it. Hit 10x to speed that up. There we are. Just waiting for that red X to come around. Now, the thing that gets crazy about docking the space shuttle is normally, at this point, you would yaw with 1 and 3 in order to bring the red X over. You don't do that with the space shuttle because you're not going this way. You know, so yaw like that doesn't work. You're on your back. So if you yaw, you're doing this, and that's not what you want. So in order to bring the red X around, you actually did roll, not yaw, so it's confusing. And I need to tell the ISS once again to stop rotating. Remote vessel control. ISS, kill rotate. Alright, now pitch still works the same way basically, so we're going to pitch this way a bit to bring the X around. Now I'm going to roll. I'm going to roll in order to yaw. And now I need to yaw in order to roll, because you can see that red triangle. I need to be rolled like that.
Translation.
And translation's off also. Instead of, you know, normally you would go down, you would translate down in order to get, you know, in order to start heading toward this, but we can't do that here because we're facing this way, so we need to translate using reverse translation. So 9 is what makes us go down in this case. Actually, I might have that backwards. It might be up. Okay, it's up. It's forward translation. So now we're translating. Now, I think 1 and 3 work the same way. Yeah, that's one of the few that still work. Okay, and now I need to use up-down translation in order to make myself move toward the ISS. Normally you would use 9 and 6. You know, 6 would push you forward because you're facing the ISS, but in this case, again, since I'm on my back, I'm going to use the up-down translation in order to push myself toward the ISS this way. It's going to be 2. See, the relative velocity is now changing. It's going the other way, and we're going to move toward the ISS at least 3 meters a second or so. That way it doesn't take so long to get over there. So this is the situation. If I can get a good camera angle here, that's what we're doing. We're on our back, and we're heading toward the ISS now. And I'm going to bring up remote vessel control and just leave it open for now because the ISS feels like it's still rotating a bit. Every now and then I'll just tell it to quit rotating.
Rotation.
And we need to pitch a bit because our X is drifting. And that's the wrong way. And it seems like it's pitching down, so I'm just going to overcompensate a little bit. Go up a little bit. That way, if it continues to slip this way, it'll just get closer to the center.
Translation.
Our translation is not where it needs to be. So translate over. And now we need to do 6, which is down. And now we need to yaw in order to roll.
Rotation.
Just to get the triangles more centered, like that.
Translation.
Translate back to center. Okay. We're 280 meters out. Let's do a bit of 10x just to get over there quicker. And back to real time, and we're... We're 120 meters out. Fine movements at this point. We'll go ahead and kill rotate one more time on the ISS. And we're going to slow things down here in a second.
Rotation. Translation.
And remember not to press 9 to slow down. We need to press 8 to slow down. Because we're facing a different direction. Go down to 1 meter a second. Pretty close. slow things down some more here in a second. Now to 0.25. Everything's lined up really well. Actually, it's pretty much perfect. 7 meters to go.
Rotation. Translation.
Bit of translation, just to clean that up. Four meters, and we're slipping a bit. A bit of control thrust here just to keep everything centered, and we're docked. And there you have it.
Houston, we show capture and hard dock. Congratulations.
Docking to the ISS with the space shuttle. And we're coming into sunrise, which is pretty cool. So we'll warp time forward here just a little bit to get a good view. There, that's a better camera angle. Maybe. Yeah, like that. So, anyway, yeah, like I said, I just wanted to make this video. Actually, I didn't think it would take a whole hour, but I wanted to test out some new equipment. Got the new HD cam, which looks fantastic compared to my old one, and these new monitors are fantastic as well. Orbiter just looks night and day difference. It's so much better. So, if you like this video, go ahead and leave a comment down below, like the video if you would, subscribe to the channel, and I also have a Facebook Orbiter page if you want to check that out. Check the link in the description down below, and I will see you in the next video.